I have seen your petitions, heard your cries. Many have asked, Derek Jensen. And so I gave answer. Donning my finest apparel, I prepare to work, studying the ancient texts. I forged new weapons, crafted new spells. Oh, many trials I faced. The way was not easy. But I prevailed. Let's go! I'm struggling to keep the bit up. I found a fresh start to be helpful in keeping it simple and understanding it, limiting the variables. I found it particularly easy to be frustrated when I was dealing with the scale of the objects. To alleviate this, I went in and made a reference model in Blender. I set it to not export with a model by default, and saved it as a starter file for future models. Then on to magazines. My goal is that the mags will drop from the gun and stay on the ground, at least for a while. I might end up having them despawn after a bit. Part of the problem with that is the nature of child objects. A child inherits the movement of the parent. So even when the magazine drops from the gun, the game is still telling it to move with the player. I got that sorted out. I told it to become a child of the world while keeping its current position. The final bit of progress is the cursor. A bit of game-making philosophy here. I want to keep a minimal HUD for this game, but there are limitations we have with the connection to games. For instance, in games we don't know where our hands are like we do in real life, so a cursor is helpful occasionally to bridge the gap, but I only want the cursor to show up when you need it. On interactable objects in the world, there's a piece of code that says it's interactable and says what to do when it's interacted with. And one can check for this piece of code. The ray hits an object and asks that object if it has the code. So I added an area around this line that also asks objects if they have this piece of code. When an object does, the cursor lights up. The closer you get, the more clear it becomes. A helpful indicator to the player of what is interactable and what is not. And when you're close to the mark, which way you need to keep going in order to get there. Current implementation is rough, but it's an achievement to be proud of, and that brings us to the end of today's devlog.